Central Park neighborhood, a community bordered by the Gilkey Creek, East Street, Court Street, and East Kearsley Street. For a long time, the neighborhood has been an important and wealthy area of Flint. Henry Crapo's selling of the huge pieces of land to build the new Oak Grove Sanatorium is just one of the many examples that show the importance of wealth and how it was perceived as being used in this wealthy community. The Central Park neighborhood is an important example of how an economy surrounding the mass development of housing in Flint affects those who live there and how they behave. Though this area is filled with more variety in its citizens today, it was not the case 130 years ago. Back in the 1880s, the land was owned by the wealthiest and whitest in Flint. The wealth came from all sorts of industries that ended up being funded by the development of land in the Central Park neighborhood, which has turned into the many houses of immaculate worth that you see today. One way this community was different from others around Flint was the amount of urban planning and development that went into making this community. The members of this community, like E. H. Thompson and Henry Crapo, owned vast amounts of land in this area. That land was then sold off to the wealthy who could afford it. From the beginning, development of the Central Park neighborhood was watched and controlled by the community. The first instance of this involvement was the donation of land from Henry Crapo to build the Oak Grove Sanatorium. The community embraced this change because it was for the betterment of mentally ill patients. They made sure the sanatorium was at the height of medical treatment that rivaled sanatoriums from the Pontiac and Hillsdale area. After the sanatorium had run its course, the building was transformed into the Flint Junior College. In addition to the changes of the sanatorium, another major change came to the community with the addition of the highway system, which eventually cut through the neighborhood. I-475 was added to the highway system in 1973. The need for the highway was to cut through Flint and make traffic easier. The Central Park Neighborhood Association fought for control of development, but still lost the houses that lined East Street. One of these houses was the Bishop House, that was demolished in order to build an on-ramp. Even still today, members of the community gather once a month to decide on community issues, such as development. One major characteristic of this community was wealth. Nearly every house reeks of money. For the outsiders of this neighborhood, it was an ongoing symbol of the unachievable. The Central Park neighborhood became wealthy from the beginning. Many of the plots of land were bought up by E. H. Thompson, Henry Crapo, Grovel Pearson, and A. B. Weatherby. When the houses were built, they were sold to wealthy people. These people were from the upper end of the industries, such as cars, mills, banks, and more. Men like Robert Whaley, Abner Johnson, and James A. Remick were leaders of their time. Henry Crapo was a governor, Robert Whaley was a financier, Abner Johnson was an attorney, and E. H. Thompson was a lawyer. These men were of power and wealth, which led to the neighborhood being the same. Since the land was wealthy from the beginning, it was only expected to be a whites-only neighborhood. It was not until after the Civil Rights Movement that the residents become mixed. Even with the change in demographics, the community is still people who can afford a richer lifestyle. This continuing wealth led to the Flint Cultural Center. With wealth came education. As we look toward the 20th century, the importance of education increases. More children are being sent to school instead of work, and more young adults are going to college. Many members in the Central Park community pushed for better education just as the rest of the country had. After the closing of Oak Grove, the buildings were turned into the first Flint Junior College, which was the precursor to Mott College. This college was started by C.S. Mott, who wanted a better, local education option for young men. After the college ended, the buildings were used for the Flint High School, which later became Central High School. In an attempt to make people aware of the community's history in the 1970s, a series of newsletters written by Cecil McKinnon that told of Flint and what he remembered as a boy were sent out. These newsletters told of stories of old and relived the past golden days. Mr. Mott and Mr. McKinnon were not the only ones, however. In 1992, education was further expanded through the building of the Flint Cultural Center. This center is unique because so few cities have one. The Cultural Center offers paintings, statues, and so much more to open the horizons of the community's minds. The center was built across from the Central High School. thus making this block full of education along with the buildings of the Flint Public Library. The library was built with the help of the Ruth Mott Foundation. Through all of these avenues, the Central Park neighborhood continues to offer many opportunities for the education to the residents and the rest of Flint.